I was 14 or 15 years old when this happened, and I was camping and fishing on a trip with my grandfather and my big brother at Camp Roberts in California. This was about 50 years ago, but I have never forgotten a single thing that happened during that trip. I had gotten up just as the sky was beginning to lighten. I headed straight down the river with the rising sun on my left. After, say, 20 or 30 minutes of fishing my way upstream, I reached a wide spot in the river, so I decided to set up my small camping spot there. I had not crossed the river or turned back. Where the sun should have been rising in my face, it was coming up behind me. I suddenly became very cold and confused. I got sweat running down my face and my back by then. Then the fear hit me, and I became very, very afraid. I lay down for a minute, hoping this would all go away. When I hear people talking, I raise my head to see about 6 Native Americans on horseback. They didn't hear me, but they kept pointing with lances further upstream. These were not movie-looking Indians or Native Americans, but more the type you would see on a reservation reenactment. They heard something coming from behind them, and they bolted out of there fast. I mean really fast. And lo and behold, not 5 minutes later, a group of what I assume to be cavalry, American cavalrymen, 10 or 15 maybe, they came around the area. I did see them with my own eyes. The leader asked if I had seen anybody, and I had told them about the Native Americans and pointed the way that they went and where they had left to. Once these guys had left the trot, I decided that it was time for me to go. But I knew that I had not crossed the river, so I went back the same way that I came. I didn't notice when the sun went back to normal, but I do remember that as I started back, it began to rain really hard for a really short period of time. When the raining clouds cleared up, the sun was back where it should have been. I went into camp and refused to go out alone the rest of the trip. I only ever told my brother what happened to me. Surprisingly, he never made fun of me at all. He just stayed by my side for the rest of the trip. Others may not believe me, but I know what happened to me. I know what I experienced, and I know what I saw. Seriously, I don't believe in alternative realities or time slips. I must declare and I must say that I'm a fundamentalist Christian, but this story is 100% true, and both me and my dad can confirm and attest to what happened. So my dad and I were driving, and we got lost on our way to where we were going to go. We saw a diner with a few old cars out front around this area we were traveling. We went into the diner, and as soon as we did that, everything felt really, really bizarre. It felt like a different time altogether. On the jukebox was something like doo-wop or some kind of oldie type music that was playing. Everybody was dressed like they were from the 1950s. That's the best way that I can describe what I saw, and really that's the only way that I can describe what I saw, and that's just based off of movies and things like that. It was packed, and the whole place went from noisy to silent, except for the jukebox, and everybody was staring at us like we were aliens as soon as we walked in. They knew that we didn't belong there. I noticed them all drinking from glass bottles, both Coke and Pepsi. My dad was wearing overalls, and me, I had on a white t-shirt. My shirt said Spider-Man, and I had jeans on, and I got this feeling like, you don't belong here, get out, leave immediately. And it just fell upon me and my dad, as I mentioned earlier. So he grabbed me and held me close, and he asked for directions from the waitress. And she was talking about dirt roads, despite the fact that everywhere around us was now paved, everywhere you could imagine. But my dad knew this place from way back, and he understood more or less what she was saying to him based on her directions, and they were correct. My dad knew the area for a while and understood how the roads went before things were paved. My dad said as soon as he could, let's just get the hell out of here. And for the first time ever, my dad beat me to the truck, followed by my dad speeding over 60 miles per hour all the way home. And there was 2 hours of silence during that drive as well. We were home, and I broke the silence and only got a few words out of my dad after I asked him, "Did you see that?" And his mouth was open. So was mine after I asked him. My dad said, "Yes, son, I did." My mom heard the truck pull in, but after 20 minutes of still being inside, She came out to check on us and saw how dumbfounded we look. Even after 2 hours of driving, we didn't want to get out of the car. We were just awestruck by what we saw. My mom came out to see what was wrong, but we didn't tell her anything until the next day because we couldn't get it out until then. It was too weird. So what do you think? Was this some kind of a time slip, or just a bunch of really, really strange and bizarre coincidences that made it seem like we traveled through time? I've been a little bit too creeped out, though, to ask my dad if he could take us back to that area, as going back there just sends chills down my spine. This happened last year, but I still can't explain any of it for some reason. It's just too weird. For years, my mom and I would go grocery shopping together on the weekends. On our way there, we would always pass a diner that had been closed down and boarded up for the last decade. It was falling apart, the grass was overrun, there was graffiti all over it, windows were broken, etc. Right when quarantine shut everything down last year, we went for a few weeks without grocery shopping because we had stocked up beforehand to last us about a month or so. When we went to go again, we passed a diner, and both of us at the same time exclaimed that it was up and running. We were at the red light and had plenty of time to look at it really good. We made comments about how quickly they fixed everything up and how everything looked nice and beautiful, not the way that it looked before. The grass was mowed and flowers had been planted. The parking lot was filled with cars of people, and there was lots of them inside. The graffiti was all gone, and the windows were fixed. The lights strung along the windows, and the place looked gorgeous, actually. We talked about how quickly they must have done that over the last month, and how we were glad to see it finally being put to good use, as opposed to being run down. 2 days later, we passed the area again, and both of us were stunned when we saw that it was back to being ruined, overrun, and boarded up. I googled the place, and it says it had been that way for a decade, and there was no mention of the place opening up anytime soon. In fact, there were plans to demolish the entire area from what I saw online, and it was going to happen pretty soon. We just couldn't explain what we had seen days earlier when we drove by. It looked so alive and so new and reborn, and now nothing. This was a place that had been open at least 10 to 15 years ago, and wasn't a place that went all the way back to the 1940s or 50s or something like that. But going back to 2010 or 2011 or perhaps a little bit before that, it wouldn't look too retro or too out of place in 2020. And when we drove by, it didn't look like it was some place that was open decades earlier. It looked fairly new and modern, with fairly new cars and a fairly new vibe to it. But nonetheless, maybe we went through some kind of a time loop or a time hole that took us 10 to 15 years earlier. I have no idea. Who knows? Can somebody please explain this to me, because frankly, I can't explain it to myself. Even right now as I'm relating this occurrence, I'm having trouble assimilating what happened. First of all, let me take a deep breath and try to comprehend what happened. I still can't believe this incredible experience that just took place a few days back. The hair on the back of my neck feels and stands up every time I relate this story. I don't care if people think that this is a hoax, as long as I know what happened to me. I still have some sanity and know that I'm not crazy. Well, here goes the incident that took place a few days ago. One afternoon on this dark, cloudy, and rainy day of weather that we've been having these past couple of days, I went out to the store to go fetch some soda and something to have lunch with. The sky was kind of dark and cloudy, and I went to the usual grocery store that I go to. So as I finished paying, I'm stepping out of the store. I walk to my vehicle and turn it on to head back home to where I left the hot soup on the stove cooling off. All of a sudden, I got embraced by what seemed like a whirlwind of dust. It covered the whole vehicle, so I couldn't see anything, and also, I threw a fit cursing back and forth, thinking after this dust of wind clears, my vehicle's going to be filled with dirt and dust, and I'm going to have to take it to the car wash again after I had just done so a few hours earlier. Well, to make a long story short, that was the least of my problems. Me being all angry about this, I make the turn to head home, and that's when trouble really starts. The first amazing or weird thing, I don't really know what to call it, could be worse than weird, but anyways, was when I turned into my neighborhood, and all the houses looked slightly different, but I just brushed it off and I kept driving until I got to what should have been my house. At least that's what I thought, because when I got to where my house should have been, there was nothing but an empty spot. Yes, an empty vacant lot filled with overgrown grass and no fence at all. So that's when it hit my head like a sharp hard arrow. It seemed like all the blood went directly to my feet, and at that time I got so confused and scared, and I yelled out, "What in the hell is going on here? Where's my house? Where's my dogs? And where's my wife? What happened here?" So I took off to the gas station with my foot on the pedal as fast as I could, and then I glanced at my neighbor's house. And to my surprise, it was her. It was my neighbor's house, and it looked the way that it always looked, but with a different roofing, and there was a few other different things about it, but it was the most familiar house in the area. Also, it seemed to be painted a bit different, but anyways, I was desperate. Still freaked out, I got off my vehicle and knocked on my neighbor's door, and she came out, but she was confused like she didn't know me. She said, "Yes, sir, can I help you?" And me, I'm so freaked out. I stated that she's known me for almost 10 years, and she said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know you. Have you ever met me before in my life?" I'm still freaked out, and I asked about my supposed house, and she said that there have been a lot of empty lots in that neighborhood for many years. I was very perplexed and confused. I got in my vehicle and drove around the neighborhood till I got out of the neighborhood and back all the way to the store that I'd gone to so that I could retrace my steps to see what happened and where I went. All of a sudden, I got embraced by that whirlwind of dust again, and when I came out of it, I drove back to the neighborhood immediately, and everything was back to normal. My house was where it was supposed to be. What a relief that I felt. And also, by coincidence, the unknown neighbor from, I guess, another dimension was outside watering her plants, and when she saw me, she waved at me and said hi, and she said my name, like she'd known me the whole time. I felt much relief knowing that everything was back to normal. However, now every time that I go out, I'm terrified. What if I go out for another trip to the grocery store and I get overcome or overtaken by that whirlwind of dust that sends me to another dimension? I know it's hard for people to believe, but what if I go there and I never come back? Last night I was driving to a hair appointment when I got cut off by this stupid little silver Toyota Corolla with a dent on the back left bumper. It had an orange and yellow curvish logo on the bottom of the back windshield. Annoyed, I just switched lanes and passed them, catching a look at the driver, who was middle-aged. He had black hair and a beard. He kept switching lanes, so I kept an eye on him in my rearview mirror to make sure he didn't come up too close behind me. Eventually, he fell far behind me and I couldn't see him anymore, until I passed the exact same car. Same make and model, color, same dent in the rear left bumper, same exact logo. I remember thinking, that's weird. I hope he doesn't cut me off. And lo and behold, it happened again. I switched lanes to pass this guy, and guess what? It was the exact same driver. Same face, hair, age, and beard. It was so unsettling I thought that it was kind of like deja vu, but I thought about it all night, and I know that it definitely happened. I'm weighing the chances that two identical twins were driving identical cars, and both just happened to cut me off one after the other. But those odds seem astronomical. Is this some kind of a time slippage, or some kind of a time loop, or what? I don't know how to explain it, but that's my story. My only experience my brother and I had, we were driving down a stretch of road we both traveled numerous times. We both know how long it takes to get from one end to the other. Well, we were together and just turned on the road, and it takes about 10 minutes with no traffic to get to the other end. But it also goes from a dense commercial and retail area through a semi-residential area, and you have to go up and down a fairly long hill. With 7 or 8 stoplights the whole trip, there are landmarks you get used to seeing. We were having a conversation at the first light, and then the next thing we noticed, we were at the end of the road where we turn off. Neither of us could remember seeing the familiar landmarks or stopping or going up the hill. It happened so fast that I had to cut over 2 lanes rather quickly to make sure that we wouldn't be stuck going left. But mostly I remember looking at my clock and at the first light, and it was 2:07. I remember 2:07 pretty well because that's my daughter's birthday and it's coming up soon. But the clock read 2:10 when we made the turn. It's not physically possible to cover that much road in just 3 minutes. Even if we were alone on the road and we were driving 90 miles an hour, it's totally impossible to cover that much ground.